Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
When the General Assembly debates big policy issues, local leaders say too often they're in the dark about what decisions they should make and what impact their votes will have. Enter the College and University Research Collaborative. The new organization was created last fall by Rhode Island's 11 schools of higher ed to help policymakers tackle three big topics: arts and culture, advanced manufacturing, and regional competitiveness. This week on Executive Suite, a first look at the Collaborative with Program Director Amber Caulkins and Footnotes CEO Joe Morone. Plus, Rhode Island's own CVS Caremark made headlines coast to coast this month with the announcement that the drugstore giant will stop selling tobacco products. CVS admits it's looking at giving up $2 billion a year in revenue, but thinks the benefits will far outweigh the costs over the long term. We'll take a closer look at what's going on at Rhode Island's biggest for-profit company, CVS, on the second half of Executive Suite.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Amber, Joe, thank you for being here.
Our pleasure.
And we have to give a special thank you to Joe because we're taping on Thursday. There is snow in the air, and he came all the way from Boston. Braved it. How long did it take you?
It's about 2.5, 3 hours.
2.5 or 3 hours.
Happy to be here.
Really got to speed up the trains between Boston and Providence for economic development, as we always say on this show. And actually, Joe, I'm going to start with you because I mentioned Footnote in the opening, but I'm sure it's not clear to people where you fit into all this. So then we have a lot of questions for Amber about how the collaborative works. So what is Footnote, the company you're CEO of, and how's it involved with Amber and what her group is doing at the collaborative?
Sure. Footnote's an online media company, and we take expertise present in academia and deliver it to people who can use it to make better decisions in business, policy, and education. We do that by collaborating directly with academic researchers at some of the top schools in the world, and we develop content that they can use and put into practice. So when we were contacted by the collaborative, we thought it was a great fit because we're already doing a translation process. What you find in an academic journal article is very dense, information-rich, and written for peer researchers to understand. It's not written for the layperson to use. So we can take our translation expertise and apply that to some of the work that the collaborative is doing to make sure that policymakers have information they can use for decisions.
So is it ghostwriting in a way for these academics?
It's actually a very collaborative, engaged process. We have an editorial team, and the actual academics submit the first draft, and we work on the outline together. We work on a final version that still has evidence and is heavily cited, but also has narratives and examples that people can use to understand the story behind the research.
Charts.
Of course,
we
charts.
love charts on Executive Suite.
Infographics are really important.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about a specific example. The first Rhode Island Footnote article is now up on your website, which is collaborativeri.org, I believe, right?
Yep.
So we're going to talk a lot about that going on. But Amber, let's dive into what the collaborative is. I was there the day they announced this, a big State House press conference. Governor Chafee, the Senate president there, and the presidents of the colleges. Well, what are you doing, and where did the idea come from?
So essentially what we're doing is finding ways to connect public policy with academic research for Rhode Island. And a couple of things were happening in the state that really made the collaborative possible. About a year ago, the Rhode Island Foundation hosted the Make It Happen event, and one of the things we heard in the community is we have this great wealth of expertise at our 11 colleges and universities, and how can we use that for our state? And Two, at the same time, the governor had been in conversations with the presidents, finding out ways how could the presidents and the universities support policy research. And through those conversations and with the support of Speaker Fox and Senate President Paiva-Weed, it was really an opportunity to take the questions of policy leaders, the consensus questions, and connect it with academic research in Rhode Island.
And I love your website says our approach is guided by the philosophy of action research. It sounds like Action Comics to me, Superman and everything. What does that mean, action research? Is it different from other kinds of research?
So I think action research can mean different things in different areas, but what it really means for us is involving policy leaders in the research process. And what that looks like for us is having our policy leaders decide on the research areas and questions, and then have the academics providing the data and evidence to support those questions.
So I want to jump actually a little ahead to a question I was going to have for you, which is I can imagine some people at home hearing that and saying, oh, so Fox and Paiva-Weed will say they want to pass this, give us data that says we can. But that's not the idea, I presume, right? The academics want to look more broadly and then tell them which way to go. How does that work?
Well, I think that isn't what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is have the academics work together to come up with data and evidence to help support their process. It's really important to us not to cross the line of making recommendations and saying this is what you should do. For us, it's really about having the academics provide research that will give them the information they need to make decisions.
And could there be political pressure here? Do you see, that can be a dicey thing. I think an example to me is one of the awards you've given out is about the economic impact of tax-free artist communities. And of course, that's one of Senate President Pavlid's biggest goals. And I imagine she'd be disappointed if a paper came out and said they have bad economic impacts or none, but on the other hand, I'd imagine the academics want to just show what their data shows. How do you navigate those kind of things?
Well, I think what's interesting about that in our teams, we've really developed a process where we have cross-institutional, interdisciplinary teams. So what that means is having, I think, a unique perspective on looking at the data, where you'll have somebody who has expertise in arts and somebody who has expertise, perhaps in economics. So I think that gives the research a different look than you might see in some other areas, and I think that as the research comes back, it'll be an opportunity to look at what it says and see different areas that it might be applied.
Joe, I want to bring you into that. You obviously saw an opportunity for translating academic research into a more easily digestible format. Do you think, from what you've seen in looking at this area, that there is a gap between what research shows and the ability of policymakers and busy people who just want to know what's going on to really understand what it means and how to apply it? Yeah,
I think it comes down oftentimes to incentives. And the incentives for an academic researcher is to get published in a journal. What that journal looks like is often a 50-page report that's dense with jargon and meant to impress a peer community of researchers. So the information might be very strong. There might be fantastic insight, but deriving that insight is often a challenge. So what we have here is trying to align incentives so that the information that academics are generating, that new knowledge that's being created, can be delivered directly to policymakers who can use it to make better decisions.
And Amber, any other states, anywhere else doing something like this, like you're doing with the collaborative?
Yeah, one of the things that we looked at when we got started was to see what other organizations, what other states are doing things like this. And so it was really interesting to see Washington State has a public policy institute where they're connecting academic research with public policy. The Tobin Project up in Cambridge are doing some of these things on a national level. So I think there's definitely this is happening in other places, and this is an opportunity for Rhode Island to also be doing that.
Named after the economist Tobin, I think, up there,
yes,
right? James
yep.
Tobin. So you're focusing on 3 research areas this year, and I want to hear a little about each one and what research you're doing in that area right now. First, advanced manufacturing. I'm actually hearing a lot about that right now in the gubernatorial campaigns. It's a big focus for policymakers. Why was it chosen, and what are you looking at?
So I think the advanced manufacturing is a very interesting topic, and it also highlights some of the capabilities of the collaborative. The policy leaders are the director of policy for the governor, the House, the Senate, and the executive director of Commerce RI. They chose advanced manufacturing, and we have a research team right now that's looking at different manufacturing companies and finding out from them what is the next big thing that they're looking at, and what can some of our colleges and universities be doing to support that. So that's the research they're doing, but another aspect of the collaborative that's is important as the research is building this resource network of experts that can be drawn on to answer these questions. So we've really focused on finding out who's doing what in the state. Who are academics who necessarily haven't been called on before to do this kind of work, and how can we highlight and share their work? So Commerce RI is putting together
which is the new EDC.
Yes, is putting together a proposal for an EDA grant to build a design and manufacturing center here in the state. And as part of that proposal, there were some specific questions that came up about manufacturing capabilities in the state. And for us, for the collaborative, being a part of that process, having already started to build this resource network and find out what faculty were doing work in that area, we were able to very quickly work with some academics who were able to support that process and provide some research for that. So the resource network is, for us, equally as important as that research that's coming back.
Another area, arts and culture. We talked a little about that, and people I think are familiar with that. So I want to go right to the third one, regional competitiveness. Why did that get chosen, and what's the research you're looking at so far in that?
I think that's also a very important area, wanting to see how we can be competitive with other areas. So that was a focus for our policy leaders. One of the research projects that's taking place, research team is looking at local purchasing activity in the state and seeing how that compares to other areas.
Cool. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk much more about the very first research project being done here at the collaborative, Ed and Aldo Tibaldi over at Bryant, looking at manufacturing, and we'll talk some more about Footnote. And later on the show, we'll also be talking about the evolution of CVS CVS Caremark. You won't want to miss that. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about the fast evolution of CVS Caremark from a drugstore chain into a healthcare company that is still a drugstore chain. So we'll talk more about that. But right now, I'm pleased to be joined by Amber Caulkins, Program Director of the College and University Research Collaborative, and Joe Morone, CEO of Footnote, which is translating academic research into a more populist form, I don't know, a more digestible form, and is working with the collaborative here. And I want to take an example here, and I encourage people to go on collaborativeri.org and check it out. Ed Tibaldi at Bryant, he did I don't know if you'd even call it a paper, an article called Manufacturing Innovation and Economic Growth Challenges for Rhode Island and the Country. And there's an astonishing fact in there, and I kind of knew it, but I hadn't seen it put this way. Rhode Island lost 44% of its manufacturing jobs from January 2000 to January 2013. The U.S. lost 31%. So nearly half of manufacturing jobs gone in 13 years, which is just astonishing. So Amber, that, clearly that spoke to me in terms of getting a stat out there. What's the purpose of this article, and how does it fit in with what you're doing?
Well, I think this article is a really good example, in particular, of our work with Footnote and what we're doing as far as trying to build a resource network of faculty and share their expertise with the state. So Eddie's article is really research that he had already done, and then he collaborated with Footnote to turn that into an article that we can get out and share with Rhode Islanders.
And how did that process work? You kind of gave a hint of how it would work before, but how did this go?
We have an editorial team. We work closely with our academic contributors. So we had a conversation with Eddie. We developed an outline, and we tried to look at the information that he already had based on his past expertise and research, and how we could put that into a narrative that we think would be helpful framing this issue for the collaborative.
And of course, manufacturing, as I said, getting so much discussion now. So do you expect to have more examples of your research made public in this way in the coming months? What will we be seeing?
Well, a couple of things will be happening. One, we'll be having articles like Eddie's for each of our topic areas. And two, as this research comes back, each of these research projects will be turned into an article similar to the one that you saw that Eddie created. So that for us is really important, to be able to share that information back out with people in a way that they can easily understand.
How do you deal with the tree falls in a forest effect, where it's a great article, but how is someone going to find it, right? I'll put that to you first, Amber, I guess, because that'll be the question for everyone in the collaborative. Is it because you're talking directly to policymakers, you pass it along to them? Are you hoping things go viral? What's your vision on that part?
I mean, I think it's a couple of things. One, as far as our researchers are aware of this, the policy leaders have asked for information in these areas, so we absolutely are providing them with that information and giving that research back to them. And two, we're also really focused on using social media and using our websites and using those kind of mediums to share that information. And I think Footnote in particular does a really great job of getting that work out, and all of our articles are also featured on the Footnote page. So it has the potential not just to be shared in Rhode Island, but to be shared on a national and international level.
And John, what trends do you see in journalism and media that make you think this could go well? And how do you see Footnote fitting? We're seeing already all these nonprofit startups with a lot of different ways of delivering news and information at this point.
Well, I think evidence-based journalism is certainly facing a lot of challenges. And when we looked at starting Footnote, we saw that $65 billion a year is spent funding academic research. And that creates 1.7 million new academic journal articles every year. So in this case, the information and knowledge is already there on a number of topics that could be really important in business contexts or a policy context like the one we're dealing with the collaborative. So we hope at Footnote that we can support evidence-based journalism by tapping into this market of knowledge that already exists. And it really comes down to the translation process of being able to put content together so it still is evidence-based and heavily cited with academic materials, but also tells more of a narrative and story that people can use as an information resource and use to be informed about their world.
And what's for Footnote? What's the business model for you? How do you think that I can see the idea? I obviously see why it's pleasant, but why do you see it as something that could be a good business?
Yeah. So first off, we think we found a real niche around translation, and that means partnering with organizations like the Collaborative, like TriLab at Brown University. And we bring the expertise to try and take their research that they want to highlight and put it into a format that targeted audiences can understand. So that's the first part for us. Then we're developing a large audience. People can go and see us at footnote1.com, and they can read about what academic experts have to say about important issues in the world. And lastly, we're developing a content library. And we think that library could be really powerful for educational use, for policy use, for business uses. So we think we're trying to bring a new approach to being an evidence-based journalistic organization by monetizing on the front end when we create content, and then also monetizing on the back end when we have a content library that we can do different things with.
And you personally have a Rhode Island connection, right, with your own schooling.
That's right. Actually, our 3 co-founders at Footnote, we all met at Brown University. We're on the same floor freshman year, so we've known each other for a long time, and we started
like Facebook.
What's that?
Sort of like Facebook.
Yeah,
Zuckerberg.
we've been around. Well, I don't think it's quite like that, but I like the comparison. Thank you. But I think we've been talking through different issues of how we can use academic research and ideas to strengthen the media landscape and public discourse. So we've been talking about that for a while.
So your professors now know their papers were really dull, and you guys saw a need.
I wouldn't put it like that to them, but there was some inspiration there.
There was some inspiration. Yeah. I'm curious, Amber. Sometimes the policy process moves very quickly all over the country, especially in Rhode Island, especially at the end of the legislative session. Could you see a role for the collaborative in moving quickly? I mean, right now it's very planned. You pick your topics, and then you're choosing individual academics who are going to be looking at different things. I mean, what if they say, hey, we're looking at the 38 Studios debt repayment. Do you have any economists for us or something like that? Do you see a role for the collaborative in that sense? A quick hit, give us some expertise?
I think what we found since the beginning is a very large interest from the scholars on our campuses. We've had a great turnout of faculty who are interested in working with the collaborative. So I think as we move forward and we build that resource network of faculty, I definitely think we'll have an opportunity to move quickly on issues that policy leaders are interested in.
And tell me, you've given out a bunch of research awards at this point for people to do different papers and studies. What are the ones you're interested in? What are some highlights of studies that are being done at the different colleges? And there's collaboration between the colleges too, right?
I think that collaboration between the colleges is one of the most interesting things. Having the 11 campuses, having some of the interesting things that happen for manufacturing, having professors from New England Tech and Roger Williams working with professors from URI. So you have campuses that are doing very different things working together on a research project. So I think that really will add a unique perspective. So I'm very excited to see in particular that project come back.
So the manufacturing one especially there. And who's deciding which research gets awarded, right? When you get, I assume, you get applications or ideas? And
it's a very collaborative process. I mean, we brought faculty together from all the institutions, and they worked together to find out how they could create partnerships. And people were really interested in getting different perspectives from different faculty in different disciplines. So it was really a collaborative process.
And have you gotten any feedback so far?
The faculty will be giving updates to us in February, and the research should come back at the beginning of April. And so far, I think everybody's excited with the process, and they're looking forward to working with Footnote to create those articles.
The other big question always, is it sustainable? I know the collaborative received a $200,000 grant from the EDC and the Rhode Island Foundation, which of course, full disclosure, is the sponsor of this program as well, so we hope they remain flush. But for its first year, do you think there'll be enough to continue the collaborative into a second year and beyond?
Yes, absolutely. The state is funding us for year 2, and we're hoping the same with Rhode Island Foundation. And I think one of the things we saw from these other models is that there is definitely funding on a national level for organizations like the collaborative that are doing this kind of work.
Do you think you can get Massachusetts to do this, Joe, at some point? Create something similar?
I hope so. I think this is a fantastic project because that information and expertise is already there that can help create a better state, make better policy decisions, or at least provide a research tool that people can rely on. So I hope it takes off in other states as well.
Yeah. Is there any discipline you think is will be especially helpful to have the Footnote model on it?
I think that areas of economic development is always really important. I think healthcare is another important area for combining different academic resources. There's a fantastic project called Health Plus Design that's a combination of a RISD program and a Brown Med School program. And they're working on making the emergency room a better place for patients and trying to take their expertise that they have in a design context and a health context and make something better.
Great. I have to cut you up there, but I thank you both so much, Amber, John. Thank you both for being here. And you can check out what they're doing at collaborativeri.org. When we come back, the future of CVS Caremark and why they're quitting smoking and quitting selling you smokes as well. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi.
It's not every day that a Fortune 500 company voluntarily gives up $2 billion in annual revenue or makes a move that manages to get even President Obama's attention. But that's just what happened this month with Woonsocket's own CVS Caremark. Eyewitness News reporter Steve Nielsen explains.
A bold move for a major Rhode Island company. On October 1st, CVS will stop selling cigarettes and tobacco products in all of its stores. The company, based in Woonsocket, made the announcement saying this underscores their role in the evolving healthcare marketplace. Rhode Island's largest for-profit company expects to take a $2 billion hit per year for this decision. But the company's president said it's something they had to do. He spoke Wednesday on CVS This Morning.
We believe this is the right decision for our company. It positions us for future growth and the opportunity to play a bigger role in our evolving healthcare system.
A CVS customer I talked to this morning was pretty excited about the decision.
The benefits far outweigh the potential financial impact. I think, a company like this that kind of leads the way in Rhode Island and southern New England sets an example like this will go a long way, not just regionally, but nationally.
And beyond just cutting tobacco from the store shelves, CVS also announced they will launch a new program in the spring to help people quit smoking, but no details were released.
We want to help those people achieve that goal and help them on their path to better health.
So why would CVS do this, and why should you care? Let's take the second question first. It's striking to see just what a huge enterprise CVS is these days. As of last year, there were only 3 Fortune 500 companies based in Rhode Island. CVS at number 13, Textron at number 225, and United Natural Foods at number 474. That means CVS has more annual revenue than all but 12 public companies in the U.S., little-known companies like Walmart, ExxonMobil, and Apple. And take a look at this chart. Just this week, CVS announced that it rang up almost $127 billion in sales in 2013, compared with $87 billion in 2008. That's nearly $40 billion in additional revenue in just 5 years. At this point, CVS has more than 7,000 employees in Rhode Island and is the state's largest for-profit company by far. And as you heard in CEO Larry Merlot's comments there, the company is aiming to transform itself from a giant chain of drugstores into a full-scale healthcare company, which is why selling tobacco didn't fit the narrative. You can see that happening in other big moves by CVS, especially the 2007 acquisition of Caremark, which manages prescription drug benefits for employers, and the ongoing expansion of its Minute Clinic franchise. And considering that with Obamacare, millions of Americans are getting health insurance now for the first time, and that U.S. health spending could soon surpass $3 trillion a year, if CVS grabs even a little slice of that expanding pie, it could easily net the company more than the $2 billion it's going to lose on tobacco sales. And that's all the time we have this week. I want to thank Amber Caulkins and Joe Morone for joining me on the show today. As always, if you missed any of this episode or any other episode, you can catch them all on our website, WPRI.com. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week here on Executive Suite.